Financial Planner Marketing Playbook, Series 2, Episode 9 with Lawrence Ingrassia, How Disruptors Are Remaking What We Buy. Something is happening in the world of business. Upstart brands are taking on the empires that have long dominated trillion-dollar consumer sectors. My guest on the podcast today is Lawrence Ingrassia, former business and economics editor and deputy managing editor at the New York Times. In his new book, Billion Dollar Brand Club, Lawrence explores a growing number of digital entrepreneurs who have found new and creative ways to crack the code on the bonanza of physical goods that move through our lives every day. We're talking about the billion-dollar disruptive brands like Dollar Shave Club, Casper with its mattresses, and Warby Parker, which mails you 5 pairs of glasses to choose from. Taken in isolation, each of these brands might appear as a rarely successful startup with the bravado needed to confront a Goliath. But when taken together, these businesses represent a seismic shift in the business model that has lasted more than a century. Here's my conversation with Lawrence Ingrassia, author of Billion Dollar Brand Club, in Series 2, Episode 9 of the Financial Planner Marketing Playbook. So, Lawrence, welcome to the podcast. Perhaps you could start by telling us a little bit about you and about your background and what it is you do.
Well, I've been a business journalist for decades as a reporter, senior editor at the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Los Angeles Times. And I was lucky. I covered or directed coverage of some of the biggest economic stories of that period. The financial crisis of 2008, the adoption of the common euro in 1999, the smartphone revolution that began with the introduction of the iPhone in 2007. These were all great stories to cover. But when I retired from newspapering a few years ago, I decided I wanted to delve deeper into something by writing a book about a topic that intrigued me. And I was mulling a bunch of different ideas when one morning I was driving to work, and it was in the summer of 2016, and I remember that moment distinctly. I was listening to the radio, and I heard that Unilever was buying Dollar Shave Club for $1 billion. And I was stunned because, at one point I had known about Dollar Shave Club as way back in 2011. And that was because the founder, a guy named Michael Dubin, was a friend of my daughter, and I'd heard about it. I don't know if it was through her or through him. And I remember thinking at the time, this is the dumbest business idea I have ever heard. You're really going to compete with Gillette by selling razors and blades online? Really? Because at one point in my career, I'd covered Gillette. And Gillette is a very great company. It has a powerful brand. It has a 70% market share for decades. It has great marketing. And I didn't say that to him, but I thought, well, this isn't going to last long. So when I heard that news, I thought, how did the impossible, or what I and just about every expert thought was impossible, become possible? And it occurred to me that this might be a great idea for a book because, as I looked into it, it wasn't just Dollar Shave Club that was, trying to take on long established players. There were a whole slew of new brands, startups that were doing this, and they were creating a revolution in the way that we buy things and how we buy things. And just as intriguing to me, of course, were the people behind it, because the best business stories are about the entrepreneurs, the people who start the companies. And so that was it was the combination of these things that really intrigued me, piqued my curiosity, and said, I want to know why this is happening and why is it happening now?
I guess listeners may well have heard of Dollar Shave Club. They had a fairly incredibly successsul viral marketing campaign with a very entertaining advert that went around on YouTube and things. But I had no idea they'd sold for $1 billion in such a way so recently. So, and in such a short space of time as well. So
4 years, really 4 years from doing it. Well, the key to success, and I think the key to many of these companies' success, is they spotted a problem and they fixed it. And in the case of Dollar Shave Club, it was value and convenience. And of course, as you mentioned, the very clever marketing. And by the way, it helped that they were taking on a complacent and even arrogant competitor in Gillette. Gillette had raised prices so much, it was as much as $5 for a razor cartridge. And, if you'd go into a store, often they would be locked behind a counter. You'd have to ask for it. It was very inconvenient and frustrating for customers. So Michael Dubin had the idea, say, hey, I bet you a lot of people feel like I do. These are too expensive, and there's got to be a better way. So he came up with the idea of, I'll sell razors at half the price, and I'll ship them directly to you at home. What could be more convenient for that? You don't have to ever worry about having, oh my gosh, I'm cutting my face because I've got a dull razor. You always are going to have a fresh one because I'm going to send them to you every month. And oh, by the way, you're going to be able to afford a new blade because they aren't going to be so expensive. So I think that was the key. It was really, people say, are the blades as good as Gillette? I'm not sure. A lot of independent studies have found that they're not, but the value is so much better. And it really appealed when you combine it with the great marketing to a whole, new generation of buyers who, by the way, were open to buying things online in the way that people hadn't been in the past.
And that to me sounds like the perfect storm, the perfect marketing message, convenience, and as you mentioned, a complacent established player in the form of Gillette. And we see that complacency all across the market in different sectors, don't we?
It really is something that when a company has a dominant market position, they start, paying attention more to maintaining that and worrying a little bit less about the customer. And you've had a lot of market categories become dominated. There's been a lot of concentration. So that has left openings for these companies to take them on. They're looking for the weaknesses. What would I, as a consumer, like it to be different about this product, or the way it's sold to me, the way I can purchase it, the convenience. There has to be, again, a reason for these brands to exist. But there have been a lot of openings because the big brands, I think, lost their connection with the consumer.
And it's that connection which allows them to identify the problems, identify the opportunities to fix those problems.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why is it you think the startups are so easily able to come in now and steal a march on these large established competitors? I mean,
that's a great question, Martin. And I think it's one word: technology.
Right.
Really. These problems existed for a long time. These needs of consumers existed for quite a while. But if you think about it, if you go back 10 or 15 years ago, if you had a new brand and you wanted to launch a new brand, the barriers to entry were actually very high. It was not easy to do. You'd have to go on bended knee to a retailer and say, hey, will you carry my razor or my mattress or my, kind of new eyeglasses? And the retailer would say, well, why do I need you? I have these other ones that are better known. And by the way, I have limited shelf space. And these companies are spending millions and millions of dollars supporting their brands. How are you going to get any attention in the marketplace? So, fast forward to around 2010, 2012, when high-speed internet became available and widely available. It made it easy for people to go online to buy things. So that means that you don't need shelf space. And retail stores have limited shelf space. The internet has unlimited shelf space.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You don't need tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars to advertise your product on television or radio. You can go direct to consumer with social media or, other types of digital advertising. And you can buy your product. You can get you don't have to invest, in a factory. You can buy your product and get quite a good quality product from manufacturers overseas, typically in Asia. So all these things came together. And oh, by the way, there was a logistics revolution. In the past, you couldn't, if you wanted to buy something as a consumer, you would feel lucky if it would arrive in 7 to 10 days after you ordered it. Well, all of a sudden, you could get it in a couple of days. And by the way, the cost of shipping that was declining. So it made it possible for these new brands to build that free shipping into their pricing. So when you talk about the perfect storm, this was a kind of a perfect formula for these companies that would have been very, very hard to launch, particularly on a national scale, for them to do that. You had a lot of small regional brands, but it was very hard for them to take on national brands. For the first time, it was possible, and it was technology.
No, absolutely. I think within the financial planning profession, which is where we specialize, there's a big fear it's the big established players who might switch sectors and come in and steal away our clients and things. So we fear Amazon, we fear Google and Apple. But in
For good
reality,
reason.
well, they hopefully fear the small players. So is it the big established firms who are likely to come and dominate existing sectors, or is it more likely to be small players, not necessarily with experience, who come at it from a completely different angle?
Oh, yeah, that's another terrific question. So, small players tend to be the innovators. And interestingly, since you bring that up, most of these companies are started by people who knew little or nothing about that market before they started the company. And that you think that how could that be possible? Well, actually, it's an advantage rather than a disadvantage. Because if you are an existing player, sometimes you're constrained by conventional wisdom. This is the way it is done. This is the way it has to be done. In fact, coming out from the outside, you can say, well, why is it done that way? Why can't it be done in a different way? Maybe I can make a better product, or have a more convenient way of delivering it, or provide better customer service than it's recently done. So it often is the small players, the innovators, who come along. I mean, look at Dyson, as the kind of great example. They're kind of Hoover long dominated that business. In fact, in the UK, vacuum cleaners, which we call them in the US, vacuum cleaners are called Hoovers.
Hoovers, yeah.
But he came along and developed a better product, and because it was dominated by a player who kept doing it the same way. And so often it helps that you have an outsider, and it's a small company often that brings in the innovation. It's the startup that brings in the innovation.
And you mentioned customer service just then. How important is customer service to this mix in establishing yourself in a particular sector?
I think customer service, along with data analytics, are two of the things that really have made a huge difference. So, these brands, which I write about in the book, $1 Billion Brand Club, these brands are called direct to consumer because they're shipped directly to you. I think you could easily call them connect to consumer, because one of the things that they have done very well is to make the brand feel very accessible and very personal to consumer. And they do that in part by providing excellent customer service. You can go online, you can change your order easily, you can cancel your order. They try to make it as seamless as possible. Similarly, Warby Parker, which was one of the real pioneers starting in 2010, selling eyeglasses online. If you call Warby Parker, you're going to, within 6 seconds, get somebody to answer the phone. And it's going to be a real person, and you're not going to go through a whole list of recorded, options before you finally get to it. I mean, what could be, kind of more convenient, more inviting? What could be a better way to bind you to that brand? So across the board, these companies have created a connection to the consumer. Glossier is another example, very hot new cosmetics startup. A bunch of its ideas for brands, for new line products or extensions actually come from its customers, who are so enamored with it. They're making suggestions on their social media feeds. Also, they post all sorts of selfies of them, kind of using Glossier products. And why do they do that? Because they feel a real connection to the brand. So, all these things come together. And then, kind of you combine that with the data analytics, because these companies know their customers. They're dealing with them online all the time. The customer of Gillette is the retailer. I mean, yes, the end customer is the, kind of man or woman who uses the razor at home. But Gillette doesn't know who that is.
No.
The reason it doesn't know what it is because it's not selling directly to them. Dollar Shave Club and Harry's, which is one of its rivals, know who their consumer is because the vast majority of their sales come from consumers who come online, who give their email address. They're interacting with them. They're learning about everything they do online. Kind of what is your order? How does your order change? What is the frequency of your order? When we offer new products like shave cream, what is the percentage of people who do that? And what do they like about it? So, that be able to have access to that data is something that is a differentiator and that can become an advantage that these companies have.
So that's a lesson for established businesses who might find themselves one step removed from their customer. They need to get closer to that customer experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's hard when you're that big, and it's hard to change because, you used to doing something in a certain way, and now there's this different way. It's not impossible. You can start selling online, and a lot of these companies have. And even if you're not doing all of your business online, you can collect a lot of data and interact with your customers. But it really is a different way of thinking about your relationship with your customer and putting your customer first. There was a great little story I had in the book about Gillette, which initially dismissed and ignored Dollar Shave Club. It just thought this is kind of a fly by night. They're going to go away. Well, as they got bigger, the people at Gillette thought, oh, okay, well, maybe they're onto something. Maybe a certain percentage of people want to buy razors online. We'll start our own online thing. But the way they did it was so clunky. They said, okay, we don't want to upset our retailers. So when you come to Gillette to place an order online, we'll then direct you to a retailer site.
Right.
So you could order from them. Well, they're adding the middleman in there. And if you're the customer, you're probably saying, huh? Why am I having to do that? Oh, forget about it. The more friction that you place in the way of e-commerce, the less business that you're going to do. But again, it's because changing your habits and refocusing on what the consumer wants is not always the easiest thing to do for a big company.
No, absolutely. One of the other lessons you mentioned in the book, examples you mentioned in the book, is Casper. And I'm sure regular podcast listeners would have come across Casper because they seem to advertise on every podcast going. So the mattress company, what lessons can we learn from their experience?
Well, that actually, that chapter on that, the mattress business and what happened there in the book is called The Mattress Wars. And the reason is that became a really tough, kind of almost like knife fight between these competitors. So if you think about what's happened in, what we've been talking about, which is the barriers to entry fell and enabled a lot of companies to start and launch products where it would have been very hard in the past. In the mattress business, the barriers to entry collapsed. At one point, I think there were well over 100 new entrants. It was just so easy to start a mattress company because a mattress is very easy to manufacture. You get foam and you get some fabric, and you get somebody to sew it together, and then you kind of smash it and kind of get into a box and send it to a consumer. I mean, literally, you had a company starting all the time. Because of that, it became very expensive to market online. So what I think happened with Casper and Casper's challenge, and the company recently did a IPO and the stock has tanked. Now, of course, everything has tanked, but even before the latest market downturn, it tanked. And that's because it revealed that it was spending huge amounts on marketing and it was losing money. And so my analysis is that Casper took so much venture capital money, around $300 million. And it tried to dominate the market by outspending everyone else. But that was a mistake because there were so many people out there that it's hard to outspend. It wasn't disciplined, and it really overspent. In contrast, one of its early rivals in the US, a company called Tuft & Needle, which actually started a year or so ahead of Casper, has been profitable from very early on. And that's because its two founders bootstrapped the company and decided they didn't want to raise venture capital money. So they had to be very careful and strategic in spending their money, their marketing dollars. Now, their sales didn't grow quite as fast as Casper, but still they were about, kind of 3/4 of what Casper's was. And so it was really, quite a big company, several $100 million in sales after, kind of 4 or 5 years. But it was profitable. So it shows that, and I think it's important to note, not every direct-to-consumer brand is going to succeed. And not everyone is going to be profitable. it's like any business, and these are small businesses. You have to be, execution matters. It's really important to get it right. It's really important to not overspend. And I think there is, in some cases, when you have a lot of venture capital money and they're pushing you to get more and more sales, there is a temptation to, go after the top line and not worry about some of the other things that you really have to worry about. I would say that, Casper, even though it's running into some problems, it does have a very good brand name and brand awareness. And those are important. And so if it can get execution right, there's no reason that it can't turn things around.
Mm.
Now, just if you think about, kind of totally different company, totally different business, Tesla. A year and a half ago, people were saying Tesla is toast. This company can't get its manufacturing production problems right, and it's losing money hand over fist. Well, fast forward to the past few months, and this is again before the coronavirus recession, and it managed to get its act together as far as its assembly lines became kind of much more efficient. It took a while, but it really kind of sometimes when you're really up against it, you can get it right, and the company turned profitable. And its production really increased. So I wouldn't count Casper out, but it is tough. It is facing a lot of competition in that market, and it's going to have to execute better if it's going to succeed.
Yeah, so we shouldn't assume that as a magic bullet from going direct to consumer, selling online, targeting established companies. You still have to be a sound business. You still have to follow the sound principles.
Yeah, excellent point. Excellent point. Again, the name of the book is $1 Billion Brand Club because there are, a dozen, 15, 20 brands, which you never heard of 5 years ago that are now, kind of valued at $1 billion or more. But not every company, direct to consumer brand, is going to be $1 billion brand. You're going to have modest successes. You're going to have niche successes, and you're going to have failures. In fact, kind of one of my chapters I write about the luggage business, and there kind of emerged one winner called Away Luggage, while there were other losers that actually went out of business because they just, kind of didn't get it right. They made some mistakes. Maybe they didn't raise enough money early on. They made some marketing mistakes. So it's really critical to, kind of have good management, good execution.
A big thank you to Lawrence for joining us on this episode of the Financial Planner Marketing Playbook. I am fascinated by disruption, and we're seeing so much disruption in all sectors across the world right now because of artificial intelligence, because of the internet more broadly. I think these are really important lessons and things to think about for financial planners. While in that conversation we were talking primarily about physical retail brands, direct-to-consumer brands, services are ripe for disruption too. Any sector, any profession that has done things in a certain way for a long period of time is really at threat of a upstart, a new starter coming into that sector, into that profession and changing how things are done. So I think financial planners must be very careful not to rest on their laurels. They must look out for disruption and actually try and introduce that disruption within the profession themselves before someone else steps in and does it and eats their cooking, as it were. So thank you, Lawrence, for joining us. You can find links and notes, etc. in the show notes for this episode on our website. That's bamfordmedia.co.uk. Do visit there. And if you enjoy listening to the Financial Planner Marketing Playbook, please do leave us a rating and review in your favourite podcast player too. Until next time, thank you for listening, and I'll see you again soon.